How did this tradition get started? I'll tell you. I don't know. But it's a tradition. And because of our traditions, every one of us knows who he is and what God expects him to do.
Day and night must scramble for a living.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Torah. I am Rabbi Tzvi Jacobson with the NRM Streamcast, and we'll spend our time talking Torah, learning stuff, and having fun while we learn. You can always send your questions and comments to our mailbag at letstalktorah@gmail.com, and of course, I will answer as many as I can. Or you can, of course, check our webpage, letstalktorah.net. And you can check the archives, look for the new shows, old shows, send questions, send comments, and of course that all-important donate button that we ask you to check out and help out the show and help us continue to grow. I hope everyone had a wonderful Pesach, a wonderful Passover, and since we all had a long break and ate too much matzah, I'm not sure what that has to do with our next guest, but we are joined by Rabbi Yehuda Alban, who runs the Torah Hub, the Hub for Jewish Education, and we're going to find out what that's all about today. We're gonna ask Yehuda for his story and find out lots interesting and learn new stuff today. Yehuda, how are you?
Thank God, doing very well. Glad to be with you.
Thank you, thank you. How was Pesach?
It was tremendous. We had at least for part of the time, the entire extended family, that's my clan and down. And it was wonderful to have all the children, spouses, and grandchildren here for the holiday.
And they all fit under one roof?
Well, we had a good percentage in the house, and then some of them live local. That's an added plus.
Oh, amazing, amazing. Yeah, we split it. There's only so many bedrooms and so much space, but somehow the younger children are kind and they sleep in, not closets, maybe closets, storage rooms, closets, floors. We have mats. It's a pretty fun, exciting time, especially because I don't do any cooking. So before we get into anything, but any good stories over this Pesach, this year, last year, anything that comes to mind, just to get us rolling?
Well, I don't know whether we mentioned it, but I'm what they call a Baal Tshuva, someone who became observant later in life. And the Pesach Seders of my grandfather, although a little shorter and a little earlier than our current ones, to say the least, they were really a wonderful opportunity for me to get connected to your theme song that talked about tradition, or what I refer to more commonly is the Masorah, and feeling connected. And is nothing that Passover is the most observed holiday, I believe, in all of Judaism, and it's had a big impact on me, and I feel that every year. So what do you do to you use the word Masorah? It's like that chain, that golden chain that connects us with previous generations. I myself always think when I'm running the Seder, to create memories. I want them to have a feeling. We're leaving Mitzrayim, we're leaving Egypt, we're going out. One of my kids mentioned, she remembered from years earlier. She says to me, "You remember that year where at some point I said, okay, so when are we leaving?" That was her feelings of how we were bringing things out. But what do you do? Is there something, whether it's different, unusual, or maybe the same? What's something you do that you get, whether it's the children, the grandchildren, who's ever around? What do you do to get them either involved or to get a feeling of the evening? Well, my specialty, I don't know if I create a particular special Seder, but when I think of what my role for the Jewish people is when it comes to Seder, I think of my role as teaching in the Torah Hub, where we work with people who are less educated and less connected. And I want them to have a little bit of a feeling of what a yeshiva means, because it's through the process of learning that people have the opportunity to feel that there's strength to our tradition and to the ideas that go with it. And Haggadah is a great format for that, because it's a book that they know pretty well, and you can, or they think they know pretty well. And part of my job is to enlighten their eyes to the Haggadah, sometimes with just plain old famous Vortlach or something deeper that I saw somewhere, and to involve them in a way that they can feel the chain of the Masorah as being something meaningful and something to be excited about when they're learning the Haggadah.
Amazing. So it was interesting. My wife asked me this year. She said, can we try to finish a little earlier? So I said, look, I'm going to try. I'm going to do my best. I said, but it's going to still be the same. So we're usually, Detroit is pretty late. So we're about an hour. Believe it or not, we finish about an hour later than Chicago. So if we got to be eating afikomen by 1:31, because we're not even starting before 10 o'clock. So this year I pushed, because she said the grandchildren all want to do the 10 plagues, the makos. That's like a big deal to them. And so this year I got it, I got us by 1 o'clock we were starting to eat, and I said, okay, we got like 20 minutes till afikomen. It was just like one of those years, but somehow she was satisfied. She said, okay, you did a great job this year. By 2:30 she was in bed and she was happy. I said, okay, great, because that was the same time last year. But we do what we have to do. I saw the funniest thing. My grandchildren that were not here the first days, they came the second days, they had glasses. I don't know if you saw this. That every pair of glasses had a picture of a different plague, blood and frogs and lice and dead cows. And did you see? Do you use props by your Seder? I actually don't, but do you?
Sometimes. This year, for instance, I filled up a huge pitcher with water and food coloring to look like the Dam. And that went over pretty well, actually.
Did you drink it?
The kids did. I was afraid to spill it on my clothing.
Well, that's why I wear my kittel. So anything that spills is totally safe. For me, I'm a third grade teacher, so teaching about the plagues and perhaps exaggerating. I actually saw in many places that exaggeration is fine. Go and exaggerate, give ideas, let them feel that it's like, wow, like you just have to watch their faces. Like, is that what's going on? And they want to ask this question and that question just to keep them engaged. That's what the night is about. The person running the show has to somehow engage however many people are sitting there, but anywhere from the age of 5 to, well, no one's 60 over there in that room, but at least, a little under 60. You gotta keep them engaged. So how do you engage from youngest to oldest? What do you do? This one wants to say a long shtickle Torah, and everybody else is listening to a second grader who's still learning how to read. So what do you do?
My personal strategy, which I don't claim is right. My personal strategy is just with my Seder tables. I focus on, the younger than bar mitzvah people, and if anything comes from people who are older, I field it. But the focus is usually on the children.
Okay, great. I feel the same way. That's pretty much what I do. My 13-year-old is that borderline. Like, he sits back there. He was like miles away from me. But when he wants to ask a question, it's like, for him, like, I must take his question while not allowing him to take over, because he's pretty good at that. But okay, I just wanted to get a feeling. We're just coming out of the Seder. I hope your stomach's doing well. Mine is slowly recuperating. But okay, now that we got your Seder, before we get into what you do now, but you did tell me that you have a fascinating story, or at least to you, to me, I hope, your life. What happened? How did you get to where you are today?
No, it's funny. I was just discussing part of it with one of my students on the phone today. We were talking about issues in marriage and divorce, and he was working hard on his marriage, and we were talking a little bit about it, and I was commending him for so doing. My story started to take off faster, although there was some slow things before that, around the time I graduated college and my parents separated. And I was maybe a little more open than I would have been under normal circumstances to hearing about other systems and how things operated. And I found I was anyway planning a trip to Israel, so I didn't cancel it. And I found my way into Yeshiva or Sameach. And I was very impressed with the educational content of all the classes and the high level of thinking and intelligence of the teachers and the other students. And that made a big impact on me. And before long, I went from student to rabbinical student and to student teacher, and then got a job teaching and working for Sameach here in Chicago for about 13 years, and then went my own way.
But okay, so so you were in college in Chicago?
No. I'm originally from Scarsdale, New York, which if you're not familiar with it at all, it's a little bit like some of the nicer suburbs here in Chicago, like Highland Park and Glencoe. And
I'm from, after my parents moved from upstate New York, near Buffalo, Rochester, Elmira,
that's
up the
upstate
thruway.
New York. I always tell people Albany's not upstate New York. Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, that's upstate New York.
I bet we moved down to Muncie. That's down the thruway. So I know a little bit Scarsdale. Those. I mean, from the hick of less than a Buffalo or a Rochester, that's where we went for kosher meat. But eventually got down to Muncie. So so you were in Scarsdale. Just to tell you that I'm not, always from like Brooklyn or Lakewood or stuff. But okay, so let's keep going.
My father moved to Scarsdale. He said you were mentioning kosher meat. My father, when he moved to Scarsdale, he said the definition of verblunget was a kosher butcher shop in Scarsdale.
Yeah. Okay. So
now there's a big shul.
Right. So you grew up in Scarsdale?
I grew up in Scarsdale, went to public schools, public high school. I was a member of a Reform synagogue growing up as a child. Got educated when I decided to become more interested in religion and spent 10 years in Jerusalem studying.
So why did you decide to become more interested in religion? Like something happened, or just because intellectually you were curious?
Well, it was a combination of being intellectually curious and also some of the emotional upheaval in my family, I think had an impact on it also as well.
Wow, so fascinating, interesting. Okay, so teacher. So I'm a teacher of children. I guess I teach adults as well sometimes. That's I have sort of multiple hats besides sitting in this studio. I teach third grade children, but I'm also a fundraiser. And part of my fundraising is I actually study with generally speaking, people with little background. Passover is always my favorite one because I was in somebody's office and he says, "Rabbi, why do I want to study with you?" So in our conversation, he says that his Seder, his kids are all running away. And I'm talking about how all my children are running towards me, and he's talking about how everybody's running away. I said, you know why your children run away? Because you don't even know the story. You're boring. Let's learn the story at least, and you won't be so boring. Your children might stick around, and let's see what happens. He's become one of my bigger donors, and we've become great friends over the years. But that's what I do. But you decided, so when you went to college, you went to become a teacher?
No, I just went to learn about Judaism. I wasn't even thinking I'd become Orthodox.
No, not Orthodox. Before, when you were in college?
No. When I was in college, I was studying. I got two majors, one in economics. That was my minor major, so to speak, and one in chemistry with an honors thesis in physical spectroscopy.
I don't even know
They
what
don't
that
even
is.
really know what that is anymore.
Yeah, I'd have to look that one up. That's what Google is for. Okay, so you decided to check out what this Jewish thing is. We'll call it intellectual. So somehow from there you decided you wanted to become an educator?
Yeah, I figured if I was going to change, why not go the whole way? Why not give it your best shot and do the most you could for the Jewish people directly? If a person doesn't have the skills to teach, so he can go into business and can do wonderful, wonderful things with his money, but he's doing it, he's affecting people indirectly, right, through other people. I wanted to do something that I wanted to do was to give over ideas to people. I enjoy ideas very much, and I like giving them over.
So after 10 years in our Sameach, are you still affiliated with our Sameach?
Not in an employment arrangement.
Okay. So
I'm an alumni.
So that's when you created Torah Hub?
That's right. I made two organizations, one called Torah Hub, the other called the Ember Foundation. One is a foundation that raises money for Torah Hub and other outreach organizations as well. And Torah Hub is an exclusively non-fundraising entity that works teaching people all the time.
All right, so let's do the Torah Hub first, and then we'll find out fundraising. I love fundraising ideas. I also like teaching ideas. So what is Torah Hub? If you had to explain it to me, your 30-second elevator pitch, what is Torah Hub?
Torah Hub is a outreach organization teaching Torah traditionally to business people and professionals and ages roughly 35 and up.
How do you do it?
Which part?
Any part of Torah Hub. I discover you online.
How do you find students? How do you find
Let's say the students find you.
Chaver to chaver easily. One person recommends another person.
So I call you up and I say, Rabbi Albin, I heard about this Torah Hub. I'm interested in discovering my Judaism. Or, you know what, I'm not really so interested in the Judaism part, but I love that Talmudic give and take. So what are we going to do?
Or they might be looking for spiritual advice about their business or their marriage or child rearing. Everyone approaches it from a different angle. It's not exclusively Torah learning at the beginning, but it slowly becomes that. I have one person who I didn't study with him for, I would say nearly 15 years, other than like a little tidbit at the end. But I helped him with issues with his parents, with his siblings, and sometimes it was the same thing frequently, and just replayed in a different way. And I try and give him insight from a Torah's perspective. I always try to tie it into something, a medrash, a verse in Mishlei or in Proverbs, and I'd always try and tie it into something. And eventually now it's gotten to the point that if we schmooze too long at the beginning of the session, he says to me, "Okay, what do you have for me for Torah today?"
Well, amazing.
And that happened just today, right? People have a natural thirst for Torah if it's taught well and with enthusiasm, I think.
I will agree with the well and enthusiasm. I tell people always when they walk into a classroom, I said, you got to know the material. It's got to be clear. What makes people nervous is when they get surprised that a third grader can ask a question and throw them for a loop. And then they get mad because they've been, all of a sudden it's not so clear and they're looking at the watch and not sure what to do. So I find clarity. If my material is clear and I know where I'm coming from, then I can throw in the enthusiasm and then I can throw in whatever needs to happen.
The next time someone tells you they were thrown by the question, just tell them they should say, "Thanks for coming." I quote unquote stole that line from Shmuel Yeshaya Keller, the head of the yeshiva here in Charles, in Chicago. I used to be in his Daf Yomi shir many, many years ago. And if you stumped him, he said, "Thanks for coming." That was his greatest pleasure, was being stumped, right? And so you only got that remark if he had a great question that he liked. So my students love it if they get a thanks for coming, and it saves me any sentence of attention. Nobody knows everything. So what?
Right.
So what? Your third grader stumped you. He should get the biggest prize.
Always. So, but that comes only from experience. That comes from somebody with a lot of confidence and who has no problem saying, it's a good question. Go home, ask. I'm going to look. I have my own things I look up in class, and I can keep them perfectly quiet while I could be looking up to
That's
find
funny.
something.
I thought it came from old age. People have proven to you don't know everything already.
That for sure. As we get older, I told boys, and I've been teaching for 30 plus years, but I'll tell them, I'll say, I don't ever remember somebody asking me that question, and they love it. But I also have parents that when their children stump them, I know their parents get frustrated. It's fascinating. My mother, I always tell people, my mother could barely read. But I did homework with her, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, not 5th grade. So one year, I must have been over 20. I said, Ma, you can't read Hebrew. How did you do my homework? So she said, no, I sat at the table and you did homework. If you got stuck, I said, what do your translation sheets say over there? So she was actually quite brilliant considering that she had no idea what was going on with my homework. But okay, that's certainly an aside. So do you look at yourself as a social worker, as a life coach, or you're just there to guide them through learning?
Yes.
Okay. I love that one. But you can't be, life coaches, social workers, if you speak to them, they each say they do totally different stuff. So we're just probably using different words to describe all of the same. You say no.
No. Some people I'm acting like a psychotherapeutic professional. Some people I play coach to. Some people I play teacher to. Some people I play friend to. Some people I am their political bounce off for their ideas. But always I try and connect it to Torah, so they don't feel that they should go somewhere else, that they feel that they're getting the wisdom of the ages, always going back to what you called about is the tradition, right? The Masorah, or not you, in your jingle from Fiddler on the Roof, right? I always try to connect people to how what they're saying connects to Torah, and you get a lot of what they call in Hebrew siyata d'shmaya, help from heaven, to think of things that you never would have thought of until you were under the pressure of helping this particular person.
Amazing. My time is running fast. So let me get a few things out that I wanted to ask you. What's the fundraising part that you talk about?
The Ember Foundation raises money for outreach organizations. Its number one commitment is to Torah Hub, which are the rabbis who work with me, or under my guidance, but in addition to that, we fund other outreach projects in Greater Chicago or close to Chicago.
So that's a different wing where you're going to go individually to people to raise funds. You do it online. What do you?
Generally speaking, all the fundraising we do in the Ember Foundation is with the students of Torah Hub, but not 100%. I'm not particularly open to general fundraising. It's not my thing, right? But what I try and do is harness the relationships, as it sounds like you've done in your life, to get people to appreciate that the Torah learning that they're getting as a late starter. There are plenty of other people right now who can't afford that learning, but we don't learn exclusively with people who can help us. We have students also who are not able to contribute.
Well, amazing. I mean, that's it. So as they say, it's all in the relationships. So there was one thing I noticed on your website. You're very interesting. It says that you build synagogues and schools without walls. What did you mean by that?
I meant that the things that schools and synagogues do for people, we've done for individuals. With obviously you can't have a minyan with just one person, but you can bring Judaism, you can bring different aspects of prayer to them. Someone said to me, I want a prayer for the hostages. So I gave him something right out of the siddur. I took a picture of it and I sent it to him. I brought the synagogue to him, even if I couldn't bring him to the synagogue.
So did COVID help you? Or because you were doing this before COVID?
I would say I was about COVID neutral. Maybe we were down a teeny bit in terms of students and money, but for all intents and purposes, I would say we were COVID neutral. People easily converted to telephone. They were doing it anyway for business and personal all the time, or to Zoom. And it was hard to pick up new students during COVID. That was nearly impossible. New students you only pick up when you can shake a hand and sit down with someone and they can feel your presence. As good as this TV technology is that you have, it just doesn't compare to doing anything like in person. So new students, that dropped to almost zero during the COVID crisis.
Wow, fascinating. Anyways, Yehuda, we have to pretty much wrap it up, but how can someone get involved?
With us?
Well, yes.
They can give me a call at 773-251-8509. And we take students local. We do start students now with Zoom and with telephone calls. I have a number of students who are only connecting electronically, some of whom who started that way. But interesting enough, they all started before COVID. It was something about COVID. It just wouldn't work once COVID was on. You couldn't get anybody new.
Hey,
but we have plenty of students outside of Chicago, and we'd be happy to spread that wing as well.
Great. The BesideSTorahub.org. Yehuda, could you repeat that number again? We're going to try it again on the bottom of the screen.
773-251-8509.
Okay.
That's our number.
Okay, Alan, we got that? He says, yeah.
Oh, it's interesting. There it is.
There we go. Right on the bottom to make sure, because some people are much better at seeing than hearing. And some of us just like to hear. Yehuda, I appreciate your time. This was enlightening. I always like to speak to other people who teach, educate just with a different way of looking at things, especially now with who knows how many podcasts are out there. But this is something you do all day, all night, all the time.
It's been a real pleasure being on your show. And I appreciate your energetic and warm, smiley face. And you should continue to shine your influence on your young students, on your older students, and spread the message and keep, as you say, talking Torah.
Yehuda, I couldn't say it better. I would even say it better if my music was playing. I just don't know why my music is not playing. How come my music is not playing? There we go. Music's playing. I hope you enjoyed it short and sweet with our guest, Yehuda Albin. Thank you to all the responsive listeners. I can't do without you. Thank you to our production team. We have Alan in the back today. I've been blessed with some food for thought. Until next time, I am Rabbi Tzvi Jacobson. You've been listening to Let's Talk Torah on NRM Streamcast. Until next time, don't forget to think. How come my music is not playing? There we go. Music's playing. I hope you enjoyed it short and sweet with our guest, Yehuda Albin. Thank you to all the responsive listeners. I can't do without you. Thank you to our production team. We have Alan in the back today. I've been blessed with some food for thought. Until next time, I am Rabbi Tzvi Jacobson. You've been listening to Let's Talk Torah on NRM Streamcast. Until next time, don't forget to think about it.
The world we're gonna make.
You may ask, how did this tradition get started? I'll tell you. I don't know. But it's a tradition. And because of our traditions, every one of us knows who he is and what God expects him to do.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Torah. I'm Rabbi Tzvi Jacobson with NRM Streamcast, and we'll spend our time talking Torah, learning stuff, and having fun while we learn. You can always send your questions and comments to our mailbag at letstalktorah@gmail.com, and of course, I will answer as many as I can. Or you can check out our webpage, letstalktorah.net. That's letstalktorah.net. You can look for the old shows, listen, of course, to the new shows. You can send your questions, comments, be nice, we'll be nice. And, of course, the all-important donate button. We have different levels for people who want to help the show grow, who want to help us out, continue to allow us to broadcast from this amazing studio. And in advance, of course, I do thank you. I hope everyone had an amazing Passover. Yeah, I told my students I'm back for my first day back in class. My wife says to me this morning, she says, this is your favorite day, right? Like just getting back to class, getting out of the house after the holidays. I said, come on. I love the holidays. She says, yeah, she knows I love the holidays, but besides loving the holidays, don't I love getting back to school? And I said, yes, I do. So this week's Torah portion, it's unusual the way the calendar works out this year. We're actually in the Torah portion of Acharei Mos, which the beginning of the Torah portion is actually what we read on Yom Kippur. This tells us what the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, would do to enter the Holy of Holies. And then there's like this middle part of the Torah portion, which sort of gets pushed off to the side because there's such a focus of Yom Kippur. And I wanted to focus on this middle part of the Torah portion. So very interesting. God warns us to make sure we don't act like the Egyptians, and also that we left, right? We left Egypt, and we, with all the culture that should have been affecting us, and it did affect us, right? There's nothing to talk about it. It affected us so much. We talk about on Passover, if God wouldn't have taken us out, this is from the beginning of the Seder, if God wouldn't have taken us out, we would still be slaves to Egypt. And people ask, they say, come on, there's no slaves anymore. And Egypt was conquered multiple times. Well, what makes you think we'd still be slaves? So every year I try to get myself a new Haggadah. There's so many out there. And some have, little short blurbs, ideas, and some have just thoughts that go for pages and pages. That was what I looked at this year. It was actually from Rabbi Reuven Feinstein, the son of Moshe Feinstein. It was fantastic. You can't use it, I tell everybody. You couldn't use it at the actual Seder. It just, you'd be reading for pages while everybody blows by you. But if you would read it before Passover, it gave you so many good thoughts. I was blown away. And I said over a lot of thoughts that I gleaned as I was reading through. I didn't finish it before Passover, but I did a good 160, 170 pages. I got pretty far through. So he says, very interesting, he says, the Haggadah doesn't mean we'd still be slaves in the physical sense. He says we'd still be slaves in the spiritual sense, meaning the culture we would have absorbed the culture so much that we'd just be Egyptians. We wouldn't be Jewish. God is so busy working to keep the Jewish people separate, right? He made the Egyptians hate us. Didn't make sense. The whole thing was like crazy. Like we were so into being Egyptian, and we tried to be Egyptian. The more we tried to be Egyptian, the more they hated us. It didn't stop us from trying. It didn't stop us from working our hardest to keep saying, we're going to have to work harder to be like the Egyptians. We'll just have to do more things like the Egyptians. And they hated us. I mean, which I tell you, like you just have to open the news, right? It doesn't look like people like us right now. And I don't think we're doing anything different today than we did yesterday or the day before. right? In other words, that Jewish person on campus is probably not somebody who's in Gaza right now, and he's certainly not making political decisions. It doesn't matter, right? It's amazing. It's something to think about. So God's basically telling us, don't be like the Egyptians. Don't take their culture with you. You are Jewish. You have to follow the Torah. You have to have the Torah's culture, not the nation you're living in. And the same will be when you go to the land of Canaan. Now, it is true that these were cultures that had a lot of, they were just low. They were, it seems from the commentaries, whether it was Egypt, whether it was Canaan, these were the low, morality-wise, these people were the lowest of the low, which leads us to wonder, why do we keep ending up being in places that became the lowest of the low? Now, at this point, we've been all over the world, so, now it's a little bit, we're way past that, right? You don't want to say every place we hang out is the lowest of the low, but it's certainly interesting that the two places that the Torah is pointing out to us that we should not be like is where we started in Egypt, and then God takes us out to throw the Canaanites out of Israel, because we're moving in, and that's the land God promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And by the way, in case you're going to say, see, historically we keep throwing people out of their land, which is an interesting thought, it's not really true. When Noah divvied up the world from his 3 sons, the land of Canaan actually, or the land of Israel nowadays, actually went to the son Shem. That's who we come from. Sam, Shem, Semites. What happened was the Canaanite family went up and conquered it from Shem, and we're just reconquering it back. So just historically, just in case that was something that came into your thought process, it happens to be that's what's going on over there. So again, I'm asking you, so why are we in the lowest, right? Why are we not, well, why couldn't we be in a fine, upstanding, moral, beautiful culture? Perhaps, this is my own thought, I was thinking about this, perhaps that the Jewish people is a spiritual nation, right? I was doing a lot of reading over Passover because I was like, what else do you do, right? You study, home, hang out with the kids, entertain them, entertain the grandchildren, and study. So it's interesting over time how many people have said the Reform, before they became Zionists, would say that the Jewish nation is not based on land. We're based on our culture. Okay, they changed over time, but that's fine. But it's interesting it was even coming from them. But anyways, we're spiritual, right? You got to learn. We, the Jewish people, needed to learn to combat that low morality. Maybe we had to be in it to learn that we could deal with it. Perhaps. But at the end of the day, you need to keep in mind, we sunk in Egypt as low as you can get. And that's why the Haggadah says that if God wouldn't have taken us out when he did, we never would have gotten out. What does it mean we never would have gotten out? That it would have been so much a part of us, we could never become the Jewish nation. To be the Jewish nation, we had to be able to combat, and God had to help us. God had to help us combat it. Again, in that Reuven Haggadah, he said, very interesting, in the Dayenu, which I love Dayenu, Dayenu, right? Everybody knows Dayenu. We talk about it would have been enough if God would have only taken us out of Egypt and not brought us to the Red Sea. If God would have split the Red Sea, but not dried out the land. If God would have dried out the land, but not given us what to eat inside. If God, the whole way through. So he explains it doesn't mean it would have been enough. We needed God to do all these things. We have to go through the Red Sea, and we have to go to Mount Sinai, we have to get the Torah, we have to go to Israel, we have to conquer the land, we have to build the temple. We have to do everything. Right? We needed all that. Reuven explains that if God wouldn't have done all these things to help us out, we would have been responsible on our own, spiritually, to climb to those heights. But God was kind to us, and he helped us do the climb. So he says we're standing by the Red Sea, and we're supposed to march in, and our legs won't move. And we say, Moses, you got to help us out. Have God do a little bit more. Not the whole thing, just a little bit more, and then we'll be ready to go. So maybe the land dried out, and we said, we're still not ready. But we want to also do part on our own, but we need more. And this was the give and take that we saw what was going to be, what was going to happen, how we were going to, the miracles that would happen, how we would survive, how God would take care of us. But all of it was for us to raise ourselves up to the spiritual level that we needed to reach. So we get the Torah and get the land of Israel, and have the temple built, and be able to bring sacrifices, be able to become closer to God. So the Archaim explains that how are we special? It's next week's Torah portion called Torah portion called Holy Kedoshim. You'll be holy. And interesting, Rashi says over there, how do you become holy? That you separate from illicit relationships. Which is interesting. You would think to be holy, I gotta separate and be a monk and can't eat and can't sleep and only study but no, it's just the illicit relationships, which sometimes you wonder. I'm not saying it's easy, but that's it. And the Archaim says, yeah. Says that's what Egypt was so low with. There was no such thing as worrying about who you were sleeping with. And the same with the Canaanites, right? And the Archaim says that the truth is all mitzvos, you're strong enough on your own to be able to do what the Torah says. But when it comes to illicit relationships, now it's way harder. Why? He says it's way harder because you need to control what you see and what you think. And everybody knows how our imaginations run wild when we can imagine whatever we wish, and when we look at whatever we want, and all the pornography. And you don't have to go that far, right? Just how people dress in the streets, and what you can see, and what they're blasting at you through advertisements, right? But the Archaim says that's what it's all about. In other words, you need to control what you see. You need to control what you think. And the truth is you could. It's a battle. You're not going to win every time. You're going to fall. You're going to fall often. Get up, brush yourself off, and keep going. You got to practice. Practice trying to control what you see. Practice controlling what you think. And you become a new person. And you become a free man. Because having Torah, which teaches me that I can control my impulses, I can control who I am and what I want to do. I don't just do whatever I want. That makes you free. Otherwise, I'm a slave to my desires. That doesn't make me free. Right? If the whole Passover holiday is that I became free, it wasn't just I became free from being a slave. Being a slave, I guess I wouldn't be a slave anymore. I'd be in another country conquered. Eventually, no one has slaves. Abraham Lincoln came along. There's no slaves anymore. But I'm not free, right? Because I do whatever my desire is. That's a famous story with Napoleon. Whether it's true or not, I have no idea. But it's a great story. Napoleon wakes up, and he says, I'm really thirsty. But I'm going to go back to sleep. Then he says, you lazy person, what you are. You're thirsty. Get up and go get a drink. So he gets up, gets dressed, and he walks over to where the water supply is, and he says, you worthless person. But because you're thirsty, you have to get up and go get a drink? You don't have to get a drink now. You're not really thirsty. Go back to sleep. And he went back to sleep, right? In other words, what's the point? The point is he was in control, right? Just because I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I want something, I need this lady, I need this car, I need to do whatever, doesn't mean I must do it. I'm saying you can't do it. But just because I want something, I desire something, I lust after something, that doesn't mean I need to do it. Right? That being in control of my desires is the powerful person, is the person who's really free. So the Torah says that says you got to live. You got to live with the Torah. You got to live with the commands. What does that mean? You got to live with the Torah, live with the commands. So we have the holiday of Shavuos coming up. We receive the Torah from God, and it's interesting. God told Moses to make boundaries, that the Jewish people shouldn't come up on the mountain. Why would they want to come up on the mountain? Because God's presence is going to be there, and they're going to want to. The normal desire of a spiritual person is he wants more spirituality, so he's going to be willing to climb the mountain. The problem is, if you go on the mountain when God is there, you're going to get killed. So if I tell you you're going to get killed, what do you want to go for? Because people actually are interested in dying for more spirituality. That's why the beginning of the Torah portion, which talks about the high priest and all the things he has to do to go into the Holy of Holies, is fascinating. In the second temple, there were over 300 high priests. Every year they died, except there was 2 that were 40 years for one, 80 years for another, and then another 10 years for a different one. Most of them didn't live out the year. So at what point do you figure out that this is a bad idea? And to compound that, they paid millions of dollars for the right to go into the Holy of Holies and drop dead. Why? Because people think it's worth dying to become more spiritual. That's not what the Torah wants. Yes, you have to work on yourself, become more spiritual and closer to God, but you're not supposed to die. God wants you to live. So interesting, a person came to the Chassam Sofer and he says, I'm not worried about the world to come. I have a portion of the world to come. You know why? Because the Talmud says that anybody who says the Ashrei, it's from Psalms. We say it 3 times a day in prayers. Anybody who says Ashrei 3 times a day, he's got a portion of the world to come. So while he's standing there, a boy comes in, and the boy has a cough. He says, I'm always sick, and I can't get better. And the Chassam Sofer says, where do you sleep? I'm in a dark, wet basement. So the Chassam Sofer tells him, as long as you're in that dark, wet basement, you can take all the medicine in the world. You're not getting better. You got to get out of that basement. So he says, so Chassam Sofer turned to the other man and he says, saying Ashrei 3 times a day is worthless. Because Ashrei is like medicine, right? If you're not working on staying healthy, the medicine's not going to do anything for you. The Ashrei is good when you're trying to keep God's commands. You're trying to do some Torah study, do the mitzvos, give charity. You're going to live like a Jew. So then the Ashrei will help open the door. Otherwise, it's not going to help you. Right? But the point is, our job is to live in this world. You live in this world, what we call living, right? Living where I'm in control of who I am. I'm in control of my desires. That comes a person who studies Torah, who does God's commands. He learns to be in control. That's the person who's going to live in this world. And then, that's what Rashi says, then you get to live in the next world. But Rashi says that, interesting enough, it says you're going to live. Live? I'll keep the commands. I'll honor my parents. I'll give charity. You don't live forever. Right? So obviously it means the next world. All right, we don't really have enough time to delve into that topic. The music is playing, and as always, I hope you enjoyed it, short and sweet.